Welcome to Audio Products Podcast. We are meeting with pro audio industry veterans, founders, product managers, UX designers, to learn how they build and manage the products we all love. You will get tips how to navigate your career in audio and how to develop a successful audio product. From musical instruments through audio plugins and gaming middleware up to music distribution platforms or consumer electronics like headphones, mics, and even automotive speaker systems. Enjoy. Hey Will, good to see you.
Good morning, how are you doing?
I'm great, how are you?
Yeah, doing well, thanks. Enjoying the summer.
Yeah, are you ready after summer break, right?
Yeah, I've already had my holiday, a week away in the sun, although I came back and it was actually hotter in the UK than it was in Greece where I'd been, so yeah.
So I heard. So I have a colleague from Neural DSP also, mentioned to me that he was in Athens and then he came back to Warsaw when it was like a 41 or 42.
Wow. Yeah, it hasn't got quite that hot here yet, but it's been working its way up to it.
Will, so thank you very much for joining the show. I really appreciate Focusrite is, the brand, so it's always good to meet people from the Scarlet company.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into some really interesting topics.
So to the listeners, our guest today is Will Hoult, who is a head of product for Focusrite and Novation, so two brands from the Focusrite group. Yeah, that's basically it. We met in Berlin at Superbooth this year, and I was super happy that Will agreed to tell a little bit about building products and actually in portfolio management, right? In Focusrite.
Yeah, and I think it's a unique podcast that you're running. I think it's a really great insight into what it means to be a product manager in the industry. So really happy to be here to offer my view on a few things. Hopefully it's interesting to a few other folk out there.
Yeah, thank you very much, Will. By the way, this is the last episode of the second season. So after this episode, there will be a small break. We are still recording, so it's not that we are going away, but we also deserve a little break, and we're just preparing the third episode that will be a little bit different. But let's jump straight in. So, Will, we already discussed this as well, but my, a first question is, I know that you joined Focusrite, I think 2010, right? So it's already 16 years.
Yeah, coming up for 16 in September.
Cool. So what about and I don't want to sound like some, a pricing, a flattering the company, etc. I'm not being paid or anything. It's just curious, what does it, what's specific about the Focusrite culture that people stay for so long? Because we have so many right now, acquisitions and company being sold and a lot of layoffs, unfortunately, the market is brutal right now. So I'm just curious, so what makes you, from your perspective, right? You don't need to be a spokesman, really, how, what makes you stay for so long with Focusrite?
Yeah, so I joined the company when there was probably about 65 or 70 people at the organization. So it was quite small back then. And most of the UK staff fit onto sort of one small floor at the office in High Wycombe that we were in at the time. But I think what's ultimately kept me here and why have I enjoyed it is the culture. And there's a few aspects of it that I think are really worth calling out. So the first is, and this won't be unique to our company within the industry, but we are probably 90% of us are musicians. And so music is really at the core of why most of us are working in the industry and at the company itself. And it means that we can all relate to each other, even if we come from different musical backgrounds, different genre, etc. Even if some of us are, classically educated, and some of us have learned as we've gone. But everybody has that same sort of baseline in common, and it means that we're all ultimately here for the same reason, which is to share music and share our experiences through music. So I think that's the sort of big thing. And I think there's a few things that sort of follow on from that as well. So we love to have fun as well. There's a lot of serious things that we have to do and talk about at all times, but we're trying to approach all of that with with fun in mind as well. So I think there's not a day goes by where I don't hear other people laughing in the office, having a good time, joking around. We have football table in the office. We have a pool table in the office. We've got a table tennis table. They get used every day. People are having fun, having a good time, and so there's a real positiveness about the culture as we're going about our jobs. So yeah, I think those are sort of the sort of big cultural aspects for me. There's a few other things I think that are really important too. So we've talked about how much we like to have fun, but we have a culture of learning as well. So as we go through projects, we're spending a lot of time looking back at, okay, how did this go? Did we learn from it? Are we able to implement something differently next time that means we can continuously improve? So that's another aspect. But there's
no blaming
exactly,
policy.
no blame, exactly. And I think that's really important too, because we make we learn through making mistakes. Ultimately, we learn through trying and doing, seeing what worked and what didn't work, and that's all very positive. So yeah, that's been a key aspect of it. And I've made some pretty big mistakes over the years. None of them really long lasting or having big impact, but there's never been a sense of of blame attached to that. And anecdotally, one of those big mistakes I made, I'm just going to adjust my mic because it's dropping down a little bit here. But one of those first sort of early mistakes that I made was not related to the core role itself. I actually at a party, I knocked a glass of red wine down the chairman's tuxedo, all down his front. And I was in my really early days at the company. I thought, oh my goodness, this is a terrible thing to do. I'm going to be in the bad books for a long time with this one. And Phil responded with such grace and humility to it, and it really just taught me, not that I needed teaching as it were at the time, but it just taught me to always be gracious and understanding of other people, and to ultimately embrace that. And it's become a bit of a joke over the years that I did that, and I'm still here. What I love about it is, and I think this was deliberate as well, our office manager sat me next to Phil at most of the parties for the next 5 or 6 years thereafter. I don't know if she was looking to give me the opportunity to knock a glass over him again, or whether it was looking for his opportunity to do it. But yeah, I think we've always had that sort of really positive culture when it comes to learning, making mistakes, or whatever. It's never about blame.
And in the product role, it's actually such an essential thing, right? I think I don't know the company who made only successful products, right? And every time you just launch something, there is always a level of risk related to it. If you have a blaming culture, nobody will actually be willing to put a bet on something.
Exactly, and I think every product that I've been involved with at the company, whether it has been deemed successful or not, there are aspects of it that I would definitely say, in hindsight, we should have done differently to make it a better product. Did we make the right decision in the context that we were faced with at the time? Yes, most of the time. But you always learn something that you could have changed in retrospect. And I think that's a key skill that you need to both learn, but also come to terms with. We can't deliver the perfect thing every single time. And in fact, I would say that we've never delivered anything perfect. There's always something to be learned from it, but you also can't get hung up on that. You can't be chasing that perfection, because, as the phrase goes, perfection is the enemy of good. We have to be able to make pragmatic choices as we're going through this. And I think every product, there is something that we could change for the next time around. And that's also what I think makes it so exciting. It's great. We've delivered a product to market. It's number one in its category. Customers are loving it and having a great time. But I know next time I deliver it, I can deliver something even better again. And I think that's one of the sort of really exciting things that keeps me going when it comes to looking forward 3 to 5 years at the next iteration of a product, or the next product category that we want to enter. Mm-hmm. Got so much to learn from before that feeds forward into what we're doing next, that it's always exciting. There's always something new that we can be bringing to people.
And can you say, just on the spot, what would be those things that You mentioned that there's always like a things to improve, and I made some like, mistakes, some like a learning that was uh, in the process. Can you
Yeah.
just like a name few things that?
Yeah, I think I would go back to one of my first products. So the Red One 500 series was one of the first things that I brought to market as a product manager. And, I was working to a brief ultimately of kind of recreate the classic Red One mic pre, but in a 500 series chassis. And, we stuck to that brief pretty faithfully. And we actually delivered what I think was a very faithful recreation. We ultimately replaced components that were obsolete with the closest sort of modern equivalents that we could get, but we stayed really faithfully true to the design, both from an electronics perspective, but also as close as we could on a user perspective as well. And I think what I learned from that is actually, even though we delivered on that brief very clearly, there are some contextual things about how the product is used today or would have been used at the time when it was launched that perhaps should have changed the brief and changed the scope of what we were delivering. And very specifically on that, I mean, it's a very simple product. It has an XLR input, it has a line output, and it has gain steps of 6 dB, but no fine control. And that was something that customers did not appreciate in 2012, 2013 when it was launched. There was almost no, we really want it to have more fine level gain control. But that wouldn't have been truthfully faithful to the original design. It would have been an addendum to it. And I think actually, in hindsight, that would have been okay. That would have been absolutely fine for us to have done that. And so, yeah, it's kind of having a brief in mind, having a vision in mind, but also making sure that it fits with the current day context, fits with how users want to use your product. That's quite an early learning for me on that front. Was even though we wanted to recreate that, how can we, bring it to market in a way that fits today's music making experience?
So the question that comes to my mind right away is, where did the brief come from? So is it part of some kind of discovery process? It also, goes to what is the product discovery process in the company, right?
Yeah, I think in that case, we have matured a lot since then in terms of our process and our approach to things. So, I wouldn't dig too deep into what we were doing in 2012 in that respect. In terms of today, the discovery process, one of the things I was going to talk to on the culture front is that a great idea can come from anywhere, and great insight can come from anywhere. So I see our role as product managers, as being sponges first and foremost. We are absorbing information, opinions, viewpoints, data from many different sources, and we're trying to do that on a daily basis. So before we even look at process, we are trying to make sure that our product managers are in contact with every single department in the organization. So sales, marketing, customer support, service, engineering, of course, finance, operations, logistics. So we need to be in contact with all of those teams on a regular basis. And again, when it comes back to just how approachable everyone is in the organization, it's so important to be able to build those bonds with each of those departments and each of those staff members. So we're acting as sponges, collecting all of that insight. But in terms of process, we will be working with our product design teams at all times to ultimately combine a variety of info that's coming from our customer insights teams, sales and marketing especially as well, feeding that into, okay, well, what does that tell us about customer behavior? What does that tell us about how users are interacting with products? And what does that tell us about where we should be pointing our next products that we're trying to bring out? So there's kind of a continuous discovery element to what we're doing that runs at all times. And then we will start to formulate a view as product managers as to what those products should be within our overarching strategy. And use that to then inform, okay, what is it that we want to actually spend a concentrated amount of time and effort on going away and researching and building ultimately towards our product proposals. So we'll work with the customer design team to start to flesh that out. we'll work with sales and marketing to start build a picture of what the commercial side of this could look like and how we will position the product. And from there, start to formulate a proposal for the product, which we'll take to stakeholders, feed that forward then into a design and product realization phase, where we're really looking into what are the specifics of what it is that we want to deliver, how are we going to do it, but crucially keeping the why in mind at all times, so to make sure that we're hopefully making the right choices, decisions along the way that feed forward into the what we're ultimately planning to deliver to market.
Interesting. I mean, I love the analogy of a sponge. It's it doesn't necessarily have to come straight from the users, right? You attend shows, you talk to friends, you like listen, watch the videos. Actually, engineers can come up with some great ideas too.
Yeah.
There was actually like a very interesting conversation I had in Helsinki. We organized these meetups as well for product teams, designers, and the colleagues from Oakland, they said they have actually pretty interesting process where actually engineers they call them like a vision owners. So people who hear things and they say, how can we, expand on what is currently possible in terms of DSP. And, it's still, and to me, it was actually interesting because it's a bit, so like the first impression is, it's a bit like a upside down process where engineers are first and then there is a product team. But if you think about the idea of sponge, where you have a product lead who absorbs things from different sources, it's just like another way you can innovate, right? By actually seeing how can we push technology further and actually, do some processing that has never, been, what was not possible earlier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a key thing to keep in mind is that ultimately we are trying to help somebody, help a user, help a customer to achieve a goal. Our job as a product manager is not necessarily to define precisely how that should happen. Sometimes we will, sometimes we will lean into engineering to help solve that how question. And other times it's more collaborative. So I think, you're absolutely right. It's interesting to hear those different perspectives, and we've got to remember as well that we are ultimately, as human beings, influenced by the experiences and the information that we absorb from around us, and therefore seeking out another perspective on that, you will get very different results in terms of the decisions that would be made, etc. Sometimes for the better, in terms of being able to think in a way that perhaps wasn't thought about before, and sometimes maybe not for the better in the maybe somebody doesn't have all of the context to be able to make an informed choice about something, but crucially doesn't stop them having an opinion on it. We all have opinions.
True. So what was also difficult for you when you started your, on I think you mentioned RedNet was the first product that you launched, right? As a product manager, and you came from sales, right? Or business development to
yeah.
product.
So I started out in a media role at Focusrite. So originally I was sort of liaising with the print media at the time, booking adverts, organizing reviews of equipment, and it was enjoyable. I liked being around music making. I liked being around the technological side of it, but I also felt that I wasn't really exercising my technical knowledge. So my background is, like many people in our industry, started playing guitar in a band, was the guy who organized all the recordings and did the PA systems and all that sort of thing. Started getting really interested in the recording and mixing side of things, and started sort of offering that as a service out of my parents' house. I basically got a reputation in the local area as the go-to guy to help you make a demo with your band, kind of thing. So it wasn't professional. It was very very spit and sawdust, as they say. But ultimately, got really into that, enjoyed it, and thought I would pursue that as a qualification. Went to university at the University of Surrey and studied music and sound recording, the Tom Meister course. Spent 4 years in total on the education side, and spent a year of that in industry at Avid Technology, specifically within the DigiDesign team in the UK. and thought, yeah, actually, I really want to work in this side of the industry rather than the actual recording side of things. I've really got a taste for the equipment side of things.
So you in this design in UK, did you work with Francois as well at the time?
I didn't work with Francois. No, I worked under Tim Hurrell in the
Okay.
UK team. Worked in pre-sales mainly on the phone with end customers who were looking to get information prior to purchase, or alternatively to resellers who were trying to get stock or product information, pricing
Hmm.
information, that sort of thing. Worked a few trade shows with the team as well. But yeah, I worked under Tim, worked alongside David Gould,
Hmm.
Charlotte Dawson, Trev Phipps, yeah, a handful of others that were in the team at that time. But yeah, we had kind of a small corner of the UK office in Pinewood. It was great fun to work in that team, and again, like that team sort of epitomised the sort of work hard, play hard aspect that I mentioned is kind of true here at Focusrite as well. Everyone had a great time, and yeah, it really gave me a sense of what it was like to work in a team, and therefore to what it really meant to embrace that side of things. Yeah, I had a great time there. Moved across to Focusrite, but yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, I'm just like coming back to the culture again. To me, it's actually peculiar because Focusrite is right now quite a big group that consists of multiple brands and publicly traded. So it's so cool to see that you can still, you don't have to become like a greedy and some kind of crazy, like a hated by, or like a, maybe hated's a big word, but I mean, like some brands unfortunately have some, that some people like write and talk about. And I mean, I can see that Focusrite never is, so wherever you go, it's always like a big appreciation. If you choose an equipment, people still tell you, hey, like buy Focusrite because they, keep the quality and there is no like a controversy around them. Again, I don't want to like a point finger at anybody. That's not
Yeah,
my point, but I mean, that's a great, I mean, a unique, I think, characteristic.
yeah, and I think there's quite a few reasons why, but culture is a real key part of that. And you talked before, or rather, you asked before about what keeps people at Focusrite for a long time. I'm, as we mentioned, I'm in the last month of my 16th year at the company, and I'm not even one of the longest that's been here. I'm getting towards that stage, but there's a few others on my leadership team who are over 20 years of service. The managing director of Focusrite and Novation, Tim Dingley, has been here over 20 years at this point. Our chief revenue officer, Damien Hawley, has been here coming up for 20 years, I think, as well. So there's a lot of people in combination of positions that have ultimately been here for a long time, and they have been a key part of ultimately being, like, we're all custodians, right, of the culture. Everyone is responsible for the culture within an organization, and that longevity and that continuity since we were, in the case of Tim, I think there were probably 15 or 20 people at the organization when he joined. There's that long-term continuity of what it means to be a part of Focusrite, what it means to work at the company, and ultimately what we're trying to deliver to our customers. And again, I'd say the same of Phil Dudderidge. So Phil founded Focusrite Audio Engineering Limited from the ashes of Focusrite Limited that Rupert Neve had founded. So Phil took that on in '89 and has been ever present up until today, and has been a key part again of that continuity of sort of setting expectations, setting the culture. That's been a really key part of it, is ultimately the people. Like we are the company, we are the brand, we are the ones who are delivering the physical product, and a part of it sounds kind of cheesy, but a part of us is sort of making its way through into each of those products. And there's ultimately a cyclical relationship in that. The products affect us and how we think about things, and then we start to affect the products and how they're delivered to market and what features they have, etc. So it to the hundreds of thousands of customers that are buying our interface, they won't know necessarily the individuals who have had a part of it, but it sounds cheesy again, but a part of us is sort of coming through in each of those products, and I think that's what makes that really special.
Absolutely, absolutely. I saw the same at Avid, like people like 30 years. I mean, really like from early days of DG design and the same. I remember like interviewing co-founder of Audiokinetic, from Quebec, from Montreal, the middleware for game audio, and it's the same. The entire company, like 20 years and more. So it actually tells us a lot about the culture and the founders, right? If you have it's like a family, like everybody feel like safe.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Then you can actually build cool products. But listen, can I just like jump back to the sort of your product management
Yeah.
role? So coming back from this like a pre-sales and marketing, I understand it probably help you like a lot in also
Yeah.
becoming a product manager, because you were already sort of you were already a sponge, right? Accumulating a lot of like information. But how did you like did you like release many products, and how did you balance the working with the engineering? What's actually what kind of challenges did you have also as a on the role of a product
Yeah,
manager?
I think it's a good question. I if we go back to how I got into the product management side of things, so I'd been working in this sort of media related role for a little while and didn't feel like it was satisfying my kind of technical itch that I had at the time. And so I spoke with my manager, who was Giles Orford, director of marketing back then, and he moved me into a role that was called Focusrite brand manager. So I was focused more on the sort of outbound communication side of Focusrite, and I launched a handful of products, but from the marketing side. So I looked after a lot of sort of copy generation, looked at a lot of the messaging, ultimately how we were taking those products and communicating them to the wider world, and launched within that. I think the ISA 2 was one of the first that I put a bit of a stamp on. And then I was part of the first Scarlett 2i2 launch that went out, which obviously has gone on to become probably the sort of biggest interface of all time in terms of unit sales. So yeah, I had a role in the messaging side of things. I'd spent a long time chatting to customers all day, every day. I obviously had strong opinions as an end user and as a musician. So yeah, what are the things that I found challenging coming into it? I think first of all is just it's a journey that a lot of people go on as young adults into into maturing, but also I think is really prevalent in product management as well, is realizing that although in many conversations you are positioned as the expert, you don't know everything at all times, and your opinion is not always right. And I think those are some really important tenets to work with. Sometimes you have to know that you may not know the answer to something, and you may have to take that leap of faith on something. But at the same time, you may not be the best person in the room to answer the question. You may not have the most knowledge in the company about it. There might be somebody better placed than you.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that self-awareness and having that humility, I think, is a really important skill to learn along the way. I'm going to be honest, it takes a long time.
I know. I learned the hard way because I founded a startup and I was just, so bold. And also, I think, the decisions we made to make it short is, it failed. And a lot of it was about the egos and, like a strong opinions, so it's just, I got a, serious, like a slap from life, be, like a more modest, right? And I still keep forgetting about this from time to time, but it's
We
so
all do.
important. Yeah, we all do.
We're
Yeah,
human.
yeah. But it's actually, when you waste your own money and quite a lot of it, it was actually a pretty good lesson, to sort of lower one's ego a bit.
But you've heard the what fail means, right? So fail is first attempt in learning.
Okay, a good one. I didn't know.
So yeah, it may not have achieved its objectives, but you've learned from that, and I'm sure you'll take those learnings forward into future endeavors, and they'll stay with you.
Well, actually, that's what makes me a product manager, right? Because actually I came from this, like a very weird scenario. I was actually entrepreneur first, and then somebody hired me as a like a director of product. They figure out, what actually product launch means, and you can actually own the P&L, so you know what driving, like a business case mean, and actually what's like unvalidated,
Yeah.
something that doesn't sell. So that was, like a hard earned skill, but still, yeah, but that's another story. Yeah. So you
But
mentioned, yeah, the
I think there's parallels there though with learning an instrument and learning how to hone your craft as a musician and as an audio engineer. It's not easy. It takes a lot of dedication, it takes a lot of practice, and you will make mistakes. Like if I go back and listen to tracks that I either wrote or recorded and mixed 20 years ago, some of them I think, yeah, they were actually really good. Others I'm going, oh no, I definitely wouldn't do it like that again. And ultimately though, those tracks that do stand out, those performances that stand out for you as a musician or as an engineer,
Mhm.
you can look back on and say, I know what it took to get to that. I know the practice that I had to put into that, and I know the mistakes that I made along the way. And I think it's the same in any ultimately in any skill, any discipline that you're learning. But I really see those parallels with with musicianship and also with product management. It's a really interesting parallel between the two. And then when you combine that with mixing and recording engineering, you're ultimately blending the combination of art and science. And again, product management, there is art and there is science in that. You're trying to deal with human behavior a lot of the time. You're trying to deal with things that are fundamentally irrational.
Mm.
At the same time, you're trying to work within financial structures that are much more scientific in their nature. They're much more mathematical.
And require predictability, right? Because running business is actually about like managing risk, So it's actually how can you actually achieve both, right? That's the case. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you can apply that same sort of side of things to the product development and the engineering side. How can you develop a product in a predictable way too? So it's a real blend of I guess what you might call more artistic skills or more soft skills, combined with then much more sort of technical skills as well. And so
Craftsmanship, maybe a good word
yeah,
would be, right?
exactly.
Like a little bit of art and a little bit of science blended together.
Exactly. And I think this is the key thing that I think a lot of people, particularly with the access to information that we have today, that fundamentally is even in my reasonably short journey on the product management scale, the change in access to information that I have over the last 13, 14 years is huge. And yet there are still a lot of people who think that data has the answer to every question that gets posed. And the reality is data can help inform answers to questions. It can help you to form a view of what that should be, but it doesn't often provide a finite answer to something. And this is what is ultimately then becomes the art of product management. It's okay, the data is painting this picture. Actually, when we talk to people, when we observe people, when we witness what is happening around us, it paints this picture over here. How do we reconcile, in some cases, what might be a difference between the two, and in other cases might be strong correlation? How do we reconcile that? And that's where we have to operate, is in those sort of gray areas between ultimately data, which might be interpreted in a way, versus then our knowledge, our intuition, our experience of ultimately dealing with people, which is a lot harder to make finite and definitive when you're talking with perhaps engineers who want a more definitive answer to something.
Nicely put. Nicely put. Sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, I just, I had exactly the same thought in my mind, so, and even more nowadays with AI, it's even more tempting right now to fully rely on data. Some people even call like a data-driven, decisions. Yeah, which is, I mean, at least, you still see and you can still read on the internet, people say, hey, product management is even more important than ever right now because you have all the access, to tools, data, and but you still need to make the call. And I think this is where AI is not that capable. I mean, it's just like a statistical engine and actually human. I mean, it's only intuition and my opinion, personal opinion, but I still believe there is something peculiar about humans. Maybe we are not like 100% logical. Maybe there is something else that drives us, but our decision, there is the lack of nuance and all this like edge cases. This is
We,
where, human decision making is very different than.
we're not logical. We're absolutely not logical. And I there's there's a bit of my childhood here to talk about, which is that so my dad is now retired, but he worked in infrared spectroscopy and designed a lot of very complex analytical machines, and so has a very deep grounding in physics and electronics and mathematics. He also is a musician, plays guitar, sings, etc. So he and I are very similar in that respect. We've got this sort of blending of art and science in us. But as a guitarist, an electric guitarist, so crucially he was a classical guitarist when he played. As an electric guitarist, I was chasing that tone, right? I was chasing the sound that I wanted to get out there. And as a teenager, I was saying, I need to have a valve amp. That's what's going to give me that sound. And my dad, having grown up in the 50s and 60s and experienced the transition from valves to semiconductors, it's kind of looking at this and going, but valves are in every way inferior to a transistor. And furthermore, with DSP and the direction that that's been traveling over the last few years, why are you chasing a valve amp? That's old technology, and in every way it is technically inferior. But if you ask, certainly back then, sort of late 90s, early noughties, if you ask the guitarist, well, what makes the right sounding amp? What makes the best tone for guitar? It wasn't transistor-based distortion and transistor amps. It was valve amps. There's not necessarily logic to that decision. If you get out, if you get out your measurement equipment, you get out your scope, you measure the performance of them, you'll find that it's objectively noisier. You'll find that it's less reliable. You'll find all of these things, and yet that's what we coveted for a long time. DSP maybe has got to the point now where there is less of a debate about all of that, but certainly, but it's not rational. It's not rational. It's about our feeling, and it's about how we feel when we interact with that product and how we feel about the journey of getting to the result that we're looking for. Could I make a great sounding record with, a different style of amp? Could I make a great performance? Well, I mean, I couldn't. I was never a great guitarist, but could a decent musician make a great performance on just about anything? Yeah, of course they could. It's about how you feel though along the way that I think influences us, and you can't predict that.
And also, like sometimes by accident, there are some great things that come really out of a sort of mistake, right? I recorded something twice and I didn't remove the old, event, and I said, oh, it sounds so interesting when there are just two of those, I was using, by the way, Prophet, right? 6 on the one of the EPs that was, releasing, and I just recorded one loop, and I didn't stop the recording. I tried, for the second time. I was about to remove it. I just played it, and I said, oh, wow, this is such a cool effect. It's just, I didn't think about it, right? So by accident, you can, it doesn't have to be always predictable and logical. That's true.
And that's what there's parallels there with discovery, right? You're trying something new. You're seeing what happens, and sometimes you'll make those discoveries in a very structured way, and other times you'll make it in a very maybe accidental way, or as a byproduct of something else that you were looking at. So yeah,
exactly.
There's so many parallels between product management and being a musician.
True. So listen, then can you just say, how did you transition, from a individual contributor, a product role into managing a portfolio of products, right? Because you become a head of product. So now, how many products do you have in under your?
No, don't ask me that. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you the quantity, but broadly speaking, I'm overseeing anything that carries the Focusrite name or the Novation name directly. So across that, there's probably 12 ranges of products. I would count, but we'll be doubting myself for the rest of the conversation. But yeah, there's probably about 12 ranges. Within that, maybe there's on average about 5 or 6 products per range. So in terms of sort of current products that are out there, I would say it's probably in the region of about 60 or 70. And then of course we're still supporting prior generations of products as well. So yeah, in terms of what is ultimately under my responsibility and things that are shipped and currently available or were previously available, yeah, you're definitely into 3 figures. And then you add on to that any time we're working on a handful of projects to bring new product introductions along the way as well. And then you've got a handful of software applications that underpin all of those too. So yeah, in terms of total responsibility of current and in progress products, yeah, certainly well over 100.
Wow.
And then at any one time, yeah, we've got a growing backlog of legacy products that we still aim to maintain, we still aim to make sure are usable for customers as long as they can be.
Good point. That's a also like a noble thing. I mean, it's pretty that, that's a beautiful thing about hardware, right? You can keep it for so many years as long as it's still compatible with, all the.
And that's really difficult as well. Like if you think about what we're saying here from a sort of long-term maintenance perspective, effectively with if you want to try to support every product across every operating system release, that list just grows and grows and grows and becomes potentially, depending on your systems and how things are changing over time, potentially becomes unmanageable. So yeah, it's not easy to do that, and you've got to be confident in your justification for that as well. But yeah, we try to keep things maintained as long as we practically can.
And I know exactly what you mean, because over the last 2 years, I was actually, one of my roles was, let's say, Scrum mastering the compatibility team on Pro Tools. I don't want to go in details here. I can't, but I mean, it's just like only for one product, of course, the integration with hardware as well. It was already like a huge team, QAs and engineers, and obviously so I can't imagine the complexity of when you have so many products under your belt and do all of it, right? And it's just, I think, challenge of its own actually to know when to say no. I mean, how can you be loyal to your customers and support them as long as you can, but still it is actually unsustainable, right? To actually support everything everywhere on every system, especially on Apple, right? There is so much change, and they're just so rapidly changing new OSs, and every time there is some kind of new surprising features
and it takes courage to make those difficult decisions at the points where they have to be made, and it's certainly not something that's ever taken lightly. When you're faced with a question of can we continue to support something or not, but I'm asked sometimes by people outside of the industry, hey, what do you do? What's product management? And it's not an easy thing to explain to people who haven't worked in our environment before. I first try to answer the why we need product management, but one of the tensions I will try to highlight to them is that if you compare, and thankfully we don't actually operate in either of these extremes, but if you compare the needs of the sort of extreme customer with the needs of the extreme capitalist organization, then you end up with some pretty strong tension there. The extreme consumer would want all of the features
for free,
all of the time for free or for as little as possible, and the corporation would want to spend as little as possible delivering as few features as possible and selling it for the highest price possible. Clearly, at both ends of those extremes, the business can't operate anymore, and therefore nobody wins, because the customer can't get any features and any products, whether it's free or very expensive. And so that's like one of the tensions that I feel as a product manager on a regular basis is, okay, we want to deliver this great list of features over here. it's going to cost us a huge amount of money, but we also know the customers aren't willing to pay a huge amount for that particular set. So what are the difficult choices that we have to make along the way? And so that's the way that I tend to describe that tension, at least. And thankfully, I work for an organization that isn't, extreme in that sense. We're not trying to wring every single pound or dollar out of an end customer. And thankfully, the majority of customers in our industry understand the challenge that we face in terms of being able to ultimately make sustainable products. There are still some cynics along the way that we encounter, but it's true in every walk of life. But for the most part, we have this great understanding, both on the company side, that you can't, particularly in our industry as well, right? You can't push things to those extremes, and we've never tried to, and we never intend to. And we have a great customer base that I think understands that that balance. So when we talk about value is an exchange of value for both parties, and it's got to be balanced. And so that's how I try to sort of frame it for people that are maybe outside of our industry or haven't worked.
Thank you. That's a great point. You see, I teach product management for 10 years now, occasionally here and there, and actually never can. And I mean, it's just, if you're okay with it, if I borrow your analogy, but it's actually such a cool way to put it, right? And it's actually so hard. I sometimes say translate, but it's not only translation of what customers need to the business. It's actually, the tension between, or like a healthy balance between those two viewpoints. Yeah, exactly. Like interest of both parties. Yeah.
And
it's not negative. It's actually like a common sense. Everybody want to work their own goals. So I want to have as cheap, and I run business. So I want to have some revenue out of it. That's a good point. That's a really cool.
Exactly. And what I find really interesting about it is sometimes if you if you look at a single feature or a single decision in isolation, it might be more biased in one direction than the other. It might be that we have made that decision prioritizing the user needs. It might be that we've made a decision and prioritized the profitability of it. But overall, the balance should be that everyone is winning from it, and I think that's the key thing. But that tension is real. I feel it on a daily basis. My product management team feels it on a daily basis, and again, there is never a right or wrong answer to it. So we just have to have the strength in our convictions to make sure that we are ultimately going home at the end of the week with a balance at the end of it, knowing, hey, we've done what we need to strike a balance between those two opposing forces, as it were. But I want to stress, like, we don't really have the strong pull in either direction, but those are the things that we need to be able to balance. And do you know what? It's so much fun. It's a lot of fun. And I think you asked me at the beginning what keeps us coming back, as employees of the company, and it is that fun. It's a challenge. It's not easy, and you're operating in ambiguity a lot of the time. But it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
But at the same time, as you mentioned, if both parties do not, pull to the extreme, it's actually healthy balance. And this is where this job is fun, because if you have on one hand, like customers who are, I'm not saying that's not the case of the industry nor of the company, or you have an employer who is like a private equity backed and, just pushing margins, then it becomes a bit hard, right? Because you're just being pulled into two conflicting directions, right? That's a good point. The podcast is also, I always make jokes. This podcast is just, first of all, learning for me. So I have experienced people to teach me something new. But listen, you mentioned this, a tension between those two, interest, but there is another element of it, which is the making, a strategic decisions or some trade-offs if you have such a big portfolio of products. So I understand that every single product manager comes with some, ideas. There's ideas to launch new products, or maybe to sunset a product, or, so is there a portfolio management process in the company, or, how do you manage it for your portfolio, or is this also like some, a corporate process when those decisions are being made and, certain trade-offs?
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to balance. So we need to have a balance between what we might think is right from uh, a strategic perspective, what we think is right for sort of maximizing the success outwardly of our brands or of our product ranges, and then we also have to balance that with the financial reality of it. So we will have high level targets for what what we need to meet in terms of margin, what we need to meet in terms of profitability ultimately across not just the products themselves, but then as an operating brand within our group. But it needs to reach that balance. It doesn't mean that everything needs to meet exactly the same hurdle rate. For example, there is that balance to be met. So to that end, we have to take what do we think is right for the brand? What do we think is right for the product or the range of products that's going out? What do we think is right across the sort of blend of them, and we work them together. That's probably about as far into process as I can get on that front. But yeah, it's about meeting balance between all of them, which again, talk about balance in terms of the small decisions, and it's the same on the big ones as well. So in that regard, that hasn't really changed for me going from product management into a leadership role. I'm still having to apply those same principles of sort of balancing different elements. It's just those high level decisions now tend to be across multiple ranges or across the entire portfolio. And I think as well, like when we were chatting before about about the podcast, one of the questions you asked me was, what's changed along the way for me? What have I had to learn? And I think it's really interesting, now being responsible for some of the decisions that as a product manager, I didn't necessarily like, because they maybe weren't in the favor of my specific vertical. I'm now the one that's having to make those difficult decisions that maybe are for the better or worse of one particular strategic area. But I now have a greater appreciation for that and for why those decisions need to be made and how they're made. And I think that has made me a more empathetic communicator to my team when it comes to maybe sometimes having to say, look, we can't actually fund your favorite project going forward. We love the idea. We think it's the right thing to do in that context. But when we balance it across the wider portfolio, we have to stack our chips over here, actually. And that's where we're going to prioritize. So I think it's given me that greater appreciation. At the same time, I still have that emotional pang of I want to see these projects succeed because I know what they can be. I know what they what they're aiming for, and I believe in them. It's just I need to balance that with you talked before about predictability, and I've got to go with the things that we can ultimately have a better prediction are going to deliver on those higher level goals for us. And again, it's not easy. It can be tough, but it's given me that greater appreciation for ultimately seeing the bigger picture. And I think it's helped my team as well to be more aware of that bigger picture. It's certainly been one of the challenges initially, but I think it's made me a stronger product leader as a result.
Such a cool point. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I've been there, and also say I'm asking this portfolio management questions for a reason, because I can see that, that's, I think, one of those top challenges I can see that growing companies have, that they just try to many. Sometimes even startups, right? You may see a startup doesn't have a problem like big capital group, but it's not necessarily true. It can be even harder because you want to pursue so many projects and you have like little resources. You have to somehow make hard decisions and say it's actually for later, right? And especially when you start growing in so many directions, you would, and this and that and plugins and hardware and, you name it, right?
Yeah.
And so having this portfolio discipline, this is something I'm also trying to sort of like sneak in the podcast as a way to learn, especially that there is not that many resources. There are, I'm not sure if you also read some product management books, but some of them are unfortunately like a Silicon Valley, so it's very hard actually to digest because there is like I want to have
actually, I find really challenging in this particular area is there is not a huge amount of product management literature out there that is related to hardware development. There is a huge amount that is very software driven, and that talks a lot about agile and how we can deliver value and deliver it incrementally, etc. There's not a huge amount that talks about hardware, and it makes it quite difficult to learn best practice from outside of the organization. And so I think that's an area that if there's any budding authors out there, that's probably a niche that could be explored a bit more, is the approaches to product management in a hardware world, but also where fundamentally our products contain a humongous amount of software. And so you've got a whole load of influence coming in from outside about best practice for software delivery. And it doesn't quite mesh neatly with the fact that we have to deliver a product to market in a bit more of a predictable way, but for a timeline that is maybe 12, 15 months in the future.
And capex and investment and bill of materials, like components, etc.
And especially at the moment where lead times for components are going up, we're having to place orders a long way in advance of when we're going to deliver. So having more predictability about delivery, but also having predictability about the scope of delivery is really important. And there's not a great deal of reading out there for it. So if you've got a great idea, or if the listeners have got a great idea of where to go for that, I'm all ears.
I can tell you if I can make a little self promotion. The entire idea of the Audio Product Academy, which is behind the podcast, is just not me. It's obviously like a group of people, like a small community, is actually creating this like a knowledge hub for not only hardware but generally professional audio, product development, product design, QA, etc. Because I can hear it all. First of all, like you mentioned, there is not so much about hardware. Secondly, even if you go to software, you can only read books about, from people from Silicon Valley, which obviously have a lot of, great points, but a bit different, I would say, values as well. And sometimes like very hard to digest, right? If you start the book by reading, about Lamborghinis and my big dream of becoming a billionaire, it's just so hard to digest. Yeah. But that's it's obviously like an early stage, and the podcast was the first thing that, by the way, talking about the discovery and, some kind of like discovering things by accident. The podcast started first. I interviewed, by the way, Francois, one of the first guests, and Tomek, who built the microphone company, the hardware company. And they talked about the, like how they launched their first product. And then people say, hey, such a big, like a great resource, so maybe we can do something more. Then meetups came along. And right now we're just launching, actually, I'm not sure when exactly we are going to launch the episode, So the episode, if somebody's listening right now, it's, he or she probably listens in a very specific date. But since we don't have yet the scheduled release date, I'm not sure if the first course that we're launching on the platform will be already available or not. But we have a full roadmap of courses, and I'm actually trying to pull really like a best people in the industry, like some very seasoned professionals from, like a marketing and product design, hardware, QA. So we can really create a knowledge base, not only for seasoned professionals, but also if you have students, right? Like us 20 to 30 years ago, who you make their first step, and to share them, some knowledge, and also like tell them that you can actually pursue so many different career paths, right? Not necessarily an engineer alone, right? So that's the entire thing. But again, it just started just with the podcast, and right now, since it actually grew to like a big international community, I'm trying to find a way actually to, to balance also the other part, which is, hey, we need to make a little bit of money as well, right? In at least to sustain. Yeah. So So that's the case, you know. So that's my mission right now. Little mission is actually to spread the new, you know, the knowledge, and especially that people come back and say, here, this is so much knowledge, and you know, that's a you invite so many great seasoned professionals like yourself. So that brings value. So thank you for that, Will. So
No,
much.
thank you for having me. I've definitely enjoyed chatting.
Thank you so much. So again, to the listeners, this is the last episode of the second season. There will be like a small break, and we'll meet again. And I hope we'll see again, you know, in one of the shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was great to meet you, and I've really enjoyed chatting today. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you liked it. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and of course on our YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to it and hit the bell, because we publish a lot of interesting videos there, not just the episodes. You can also become a supporter and get premium content like additional reading, unpublished videos on our Buy Me a Coffee page, linked in the description of this episode. See you in the next one. Yo.